Okay, for those of you returning to the channel, welcome back, and for those of you that are new here, that have just stumbled upon this video, then thank you for joining me. And if you find yourself wanting to stick around to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV, then please hit the subscribe button, it will mean an awful lot to me. And yeah, welcome to my spoiler-free review of Scream 7, directed by Kevin Williamson, from a screenplay he co-wrote with Guy Busick. Kevin Williamson being the creator of the Scream franchise. He wrote the screenplay to the original movie back in '96 as well as its sequels. And when it comes to this franchise, I wouldn't call myself a massive diehard fan. Like, I enjoy them. I mean, the first movie holds a special place in my heart because it was one of those movies that I watched back in '96 when I think I was about 7 or 8 years old when I first watched Scream, and it was on VHS. And it's a movie at that time that really creeped me out, especially that first 10 minutes. But I enjoyed it, and, you know, I've had fun with its sequels, but for me, nothing has ever quite come as close nothing has really come close to that original movie. So Scream 7 brings the story back to Sidney Prescott, who's been trying to live a normal, quiet life after everything she survived. Of course, that doesn't last long, and a new Ghostface shows up, and this time it feels personal. The attacks aren't just random or about fame, they seem carefully planned to mess with Sidney and drag her back into her past. The killings eventually circle back to Woodsboro, reopening old wounds and pulling in people connected to the original events. As usual, no one feels completely safe, and it becomes harder to tell who can actually be trusted. So yeah, like I was just saying, you know, that first movie holds a special place in my heart because I felt like it was quite a clever movie. It was doing something incredibly different within the slasher genre, and it was a movie at the age in which I watched it. You know, it was a movie that had a real big impact on me because it really creeped me out. It was terrifying to watch. I mean, granted, I was around 7 or 8 years old. As I grew older with the movie, I learned to appreciate it even more due to what it was doing, you know, with its meta commentary on the horror genre and just how clever it was with how it sort of weaved the humour into the horror. And so, yeah, for me, even though I've enjoyed the sequels, they've not really come close to that original film. At the same time, I wouldn't consider myself a die-hard fan of the franchise. Now, I'm just going to get this out the way with, I am very surprised by the negative reactions that this movie has received. I think it's like 31% at the time of recording this on Rotten Tomatoes. I think the popcorn meter is higher. I think it's like around 70-something percent, 77% I think it is. So it's been quite mixed to negative, and I am very, very surprised because for me personally, I honestly didn't think or feel that the movie Scream 7 was that bad. Do I think it was great? No, it's a movie with issues, and I will touch on those issues in a moment. But it was a fine, okay experience. Like, I had fun with it. And it, you know, after listening to someone like John Campea, for example, who was really blasted this movie, like, I haven't watched his review, but I watched his out of the theatre reaction, and he hated this movie to the point where he actually places it in his top 3 worst movies of all time. And that I am very surprised by. I honestly, personally don't feel like Scream 7 is that bad. It's not great. It's not going to be in your top 10, you know, horror movies of 2026. But, you know, it's an okay film. One that you can have fun with. Scream 7 has its issues. It has its problems that stop it from truly being something special and different. You know, like that original movie was, where, you know, it reinvented the slasher genre and it gave us something that was refreshing and new and just an incredible experience. Scream 7 doesn't do that. It has issues that kind of really stops it from reaching those highs of the original movie. But it's still an experience that I couldn't help but have fun with. They sort of take a different approach with this one, where you've still got the meta commentary, on the horror genre and the humour. It's still there, it's still intact, but it's kind of pulled back. And what we are getting here is more of a straight up slasher horror, where they've kind of stripped back the sort of the humour and the meta commentary that we are used to. Like I said, it's still there, but this felt more like a focus on the character of Sidney Prescott and sort of what she's going through mentally, and that kind of the relationship that she has with her daughter. It reminded me an awful lot of Halloween H2O. And I do feel like, I mean, even with, you know, the movie's tone and just how it approaches its characters is very reminiscent of H2O. And that's not a bad thing. And they're exploring themes around trauma and that kind of the mother and the daughter relationship and the effects on what trauma can have within a family. And that is an aspect within its story that I found myself really appreciating. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite stick together. It doesn't fully come to life to give the experience the weight and that kind of the emotional current that I felt like maybe they were aiming for here. They do kind of lose focus on that story, that kind of that sort of deeper, more complex story, you could say, with the character of Sidney Prescott and her daughter, and sort of how that plays into the themes in which I felt like they were touching on you, but touch on is it's the only thing they ever really do. It like I said, I think the ideas are there, the intention was to give us perhaps something a little deeper and more complex and human here, but they kind of lose sight of it due to sort of how due to sort of how the narrative plays out and its writing, which I don't think the writing is the greatest. There are moments of dialogue that kind of did make me wince a little. It's almost like they were afraid to really lean into that direction and sort of really depart from what we are used to with the Scream franchise. Like I said, you know, it is really stripped back when it comes to the humour and that meta commentary that we are used to within the franchise. And I felt like it got really kind of cartoon-like and over the top with the last couple of movies. And yeah, it's completely stripped back. But at the same time, it always felt like when it came to the story that they were perhaps being a little bit too refrained, perhaps playing it too... It just felt like they were playing it a little bit too safe and they were almost as afraid to lean too much into that direction. And so by the conclusion, by the end of this experience, it's sort of really lacked the impact and the weight that I felt like that maybe they were aiming for. And so by having a different approach to this sequel, to this story, tonally, it is a little uneven. Like when you get that moment of humour, it's almost like they're trying to remind us that, you know, oh, by the way, remember, this is a Scream film. But it didn't really bother me that much because I was quite intrigued by what they were attempting here with this story. And that the fact that it did feel like more of a straight up slasher horror that had a very 90s vibe about it that I really dug. Like, this movie felt like it was from the 90s, and so it kind of taps into the nostalgia of the original movie and, you know, its sequels, especially, you know, Scream 2 and Scream 3, and I really like that aspect. You know, because this is all about a character, you know, at a certain point in her life where she has her past being brought back up, you know, a very kind of tragic and traumatic moment in her life being brought back up. And so that kind of how that nostalgia, sort of that nostalgic element plays into the story, I really liked. And, you know, all issues aside, I still couldn't help but have fun with this movie. Like, the kills in this film are incredible. Like, they are gruesomely inventive. I just couldn't believe how far they went with a couple of them. And they just linger on the brutality of the kills as well, which I absolutely dug. Again, it kind of took me back to horror movies from a certain era, like the 80s, like the 90s, you know, proper ultra-violent horror films that kind of really make you sort of go, oh, you know, wince, because you've got practical effects on display. There is CGI as well, and it's kind of obvious in moments where the CGI is used to touch it up, but there's a lot of practical use that I really appreciated. And it's the kills within Scream 7 that really took me back to that original movie, especially the first 10 minutes. It's almost like when it came to inspiration for Scream 7, it's almost as if they looked back and reflected on that first 10 minutes of the original Scream movie. That first 10 minutes for me back when I was a kid watching it for the first time on VHS fucking horrified me. You know, when Ghostface gets that boyfriend in the garden and his guts, you know, is just hanging out. And it's a moment that really fucking creeped me out. And I feel like they kind of took that 10 minutes and it became sort of the basis, you could say, maybe, for what Scream 7 is. Now, I could be completely wrong there, but that's how I personally felt. That is something that I actually found myself really liking, really appreciating, because when it came to the horror and the kills within this movie, it is some of the best within the franchise, and I absolutely loved what they did with those moments of horror. And I just loved how the moments of horror were brought to life within this film, and how Ghostface was used sort of within these moments to build tension. Like, for example, you'll have this scene where a character is sort of searching for something or someone, and you'll have Ghostface. He's always sort of somewhat in the background, whether it be within the shadows or, you know, behind a plastic sheet. And I just loved it because it really did add to sort of the creepiness and the horror within that moment. And it was just giving me something that I felt like the Scream franchise has been lacking. Like, I just love how Kevin Williamson brought these moments to life, and in how he framed sort of these horror set pieces where you kind of got to be looking to sort of look, you know, you yourself are sort of looking out for where Ghostface might be. And I just really loved that aspect of the experience. You first get a glimpse of it within the first kind of 5 to 10 minutes, where shadows are used quite a bit. And I was like, oh, this is really, I'm liking this. This is adding this, you know, it's adding a creepiness to the experience that I feel like it's been missing. And, you know, there's a moment, I'm going to be vague, so don't worry, because this is spoiler free, but there's a moment in a garage where you got these plastic sheets, and just how that sort of, you know, is used with Ghostface and how the camera is positioned. It's a moment that had me grinning ear to ear, because I'm like, yeah, you know, that is fucking creepy. So when it comes to its moments of horror and its kills, you know, and how Ghostface is used within these moments, I loved it. You know, I was really appreciating what they were doing in bringing the horror to life. You know, there's another kill in a school. Again, I'm going to be really, really vague here because this is spoiler free. But it's a moment that took me back to that first 5 to 10 minutes of the original Scream. So it was doing a lot of things, you know, for me that I felt was working, especially when it comes to the horror and that kind of the nostalgic element of its story. Marco Beltrami returns as composer. He didn't score Scream 5 or 6, but he returns here, and he does, again, a wonderful job in bringing to life a score that really conveys the horror that is going on within the frame. It's a score that I felt like does a really good job at elevating and adding to that kind of the looking back to the past and nostalgic aspect of its story and its themes, you know, with trauma. And I think there are some music choices, and just the score as a whole does a really good job in kind of tapping into what I felt like they were attempting with its story, and sort of really kind of taking you back to a certain era of film, especially horror movies. Like I said, this overall film has a very 90s vibe to it, and I think the soundtrack is another one of those elements within the movie that kind of just adds to that nostalgia, as well as kind of tapping in to what I felt like they were attempting with its themes and with its characters. So yeah, a great score by Marco Beltrami. So, to address a continuity error, once I filmed this review, I realised that I hadn't spoken about the performances from Neve Campbell and Isabel May, and so I recorded this segment after having an haircut. So just in case you're wondering why my hair looks different, that is why. And so yeah, Neve Campbell as Sidney Prescott is really good in this film. I really liked what she was doing, along with Isabel May, who plays her daughter. They both give solid performances that kind of really convey sort of what our characters are going through emotionally, I think they do a really good job through their performances at trying to capture what I felt like they were going for with this story and the themes in which they were exploring. Neve Campbell is superb here. And you've also got Matthew Lillard returning here as Stu. And don't worry, I'm not gonna give anything about his character away and his involvement in this movie. I actually quite liked how they used the character in this story. And Matthew Lillard, again, is absolutely superb. I really liked what he did with his character, how he brought his character to life again, yeah. And I just liked the part that he had to play. So yeah, Scream 7 has problems. The writing doesn't always work. Tonally, it's a little bit uneven. The entire experience feels perhaps a little unsure of what it wanted to be and sort of the direction in which it wanted to go into. It's definitely trying to be something different, and it is, it felt more of a stripped back version of what we are familiar with when it comes to the Scream franchise, especially with its sequels and sort of just how sort of goofy and cartoon-like and silly they did get. This is more kind of honing in on what I felt made that original movie work. But they do take sort of a different approach at the same time. This did feel more like a straight up slasher horror movie where it kind of wanted to focus more on the human element of its story and have something perhaps a little more emotional and complex and deep. But it doesn't really achieve that, unfortunately. It kind of loses focus of that aspect of its story. And as a result, we do get something that, yeah, it's got problems. It kind of really fails to be something that has a weight or something that is different or special. It is very familiar. It feels like it's within a time capsule. It literally feels like this movie was made in the 90s, and that is something that I dug. But unfortunately, it doesn't really give us something truly different or special, and it kind of lacks the impact or weight that I felt like that maybe they were aiming for. But, issues aside, there's also a lot that I really appreciated within this movie that I had fun with. It's a fine experience. It's an okay experience that I enjoyed to a degree. Like, I didn't come out going, wow, that was amazing. That's going to be my top 10 horror movies of the year. It's not one of those films because of its problems. The issues that I did feel like it had, it does drag it down. But there are elements within it, there's aspects within it that I found myself really appreciating, and I really, really don't understand the hate or the extremely negative criticisms that this movie has been getting. I think I have tried to stay away from a lot of them, but I feel like the John Campea sort of out of the theatre reaction was way over the top, and I just didn't quite get that same. I just didn't get it. I really didn't get it, because this is definitely not in the the top 5 or top 3 worst movies ever made. It's not. It's in many ways a different flavour within the Scream franchise that I found myself really appreciating, and it is an approach to a Scream story that I found myself intrigued by. It just, all the ingredients within it don't really fully come together to give us something truly different or special. It just ends up being something that is very familiar, but does things, or it did things for me that kind of just kept me locked in, if that makes sense. It has got perhaps the weakest reveal at the end. This definitely has, out of all the Scream movies, perhaps the weakest reveal. But getting to that point, I was like, yeah, it's okay. I am having fun. I loved how the camera was used within the horror set pieces, and the kills are fucking brutal. They are gruesome, and the camera lingers on them for the right amount of time, and just the practical effects used within those moments, and just, yeah, I kind of wanted more of that, because I feel like they did a good job. But again, it's in those moments of brutality that taps into that nostalgic element that is sort of running throughout the story. This is kind of nostalgic current running throughout the film that, for me, just reminds me of a time where, I was falling in love with film, and that being the 90s. And I think it does a wonderful job of bringing that to life. It's not a great movie because of its problems, because of its issues, but it's definitely not one that I feel like deserves the hate that it's received. And so that's enough rambling from me. They are my thoughts on Scream 7, and I will be giving Scream 7 They're my thoughts on Scream 7, but what did you guys think? Have you seen it yet? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you agree or disagree with anything I've said? And please let me know in the comments below, and let's get a discussion going. And if you've made it this far into the video, then thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And remember, if you fancy sticking around to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV, then please hit the subscribe button. It will mean an awful lot to me. I'm sat now at the time of filming on 633 subscribers, so a big hello and thank you for joining me on this journey. It will always overwhelm me that so many of you already do want to follow just some random Welsh geek ramble on about film and TV and pronounce things incorrectly and all of that. But it means the world to me, and I absolutely love doing this. You know, to just sit in front of a camera and share with you all sort of my love for film just does so much to me that one day I will do a video and sort of kind of give you a little bit of insight into that, and sort of how this channel has really kind of helped me personally. But your support every time you interact with the channel, whatever it be, liking, subscribing, commenting, it means the world to me, and just a big thank you. So yeah, that's it from me for now, guys. Thank you all for watching. I really do appreciate it. I'll be catching you guys soon.